So, I am a Star Trek fan. And I have been one for, I would say at this stage, the majority of my life. I got into Star Trek in middle school, junior high, and have been a fan of it ever since. And I'm talking, a pretty devoted fan. I've gone to conventions, I've written a fan fiction, I'm pretty immersed in the Star Trek universe. And as a long-term fan, I have to say that I have found the recent Star Trek resurgence of the last couple of years on Paramount Plus to be kind of a mixed bag. The stuff that is good is really good. Like, that's your Lower Decks, your Strange New Worlds, your third season of Picard. The stuff that is okay is, flawed, but still has its heart in the right place, and that's your Prodigies and your seasons 1 and 2 of Picard. But the stuff that doesn't work, the stuff that I personally, and I stress that, this is me personally, if you are a fan of these shows, then that's great. I'm not trying to piss on your parade. I'm really not. But I have found that the stuff that doesn't work really doesn't work. And that's things like your Discovery and this movie. And to my eye, there are two fundamental reasons that the ones that don't work. And the major one is the ones that don't work because on a fundamental thematic level, they do not get it. They do not understand the assignment, to me. And it's not from a lack of trying. I see effort in these things. This isn't a situation where this isn't a J.J. Abrams situation where I look at that and I question, has the man ever seen an episode of Star Trek outside of just knowing the characters' names? I see effort in this, but I feel like it has gone off the rails at some stage of development, leading to its second issue, a massive identity crisis. But the second one is linked very closely to the first one. That was my problem with Discovery, and it is my problem with this movie. So, let's talk a little bit about this. First of all, and I am sorry for the non-Trek fan who has clicked on this, because I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you weren't a Trek fan, but, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I've got some non-Trekkies out there, some casual fans. So, for you, a quick history lesson. So, Section 31 was introduced in the latter seasons of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, my favorite Trek show, by the way, as a Black Ops covert organization within Starfleet who was dedicated to the protection of the Federation and would do morally questionable to downright reprehensible things in order to achieve their goal. That concept of the ends justify the means. Now, it's important to understand that the introduction of Section 31 went along with one of the fundamental thematic elements of that show. And to use a very tired phrase, and I'm sorry because it is very cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason. One of the underpinning thematic elements of the entire run of Deep Space Nine is freedom isn't free. Meaning that the Federation and Earth in Star Trek up to that point had always been portrayed as a paradise, as a safe haven. The basic underpinnings of Roddenberry's original vision of the future, and one of the reasons why the show clicked with so many audiences, especially during a turbulent time like the 70s, was this idea that in the future, mankind will have sorted out all of its personal shit, would have put aside all of these petty squabbles that divide us on a daily basis, and would have worked together for the common good. And the whole idea being, when we work together, look what we can accomplish, look what we can become, as opposed to just a bunch of little factions griping at each other. That has been one of the fundamental elements of Trek, and like I say, one of the reasons why the show was so popular and so revolutionary even today. And that driving force was there throughout the entire original series, the first 6 movies, and the Next Generation. DS9, however, began to subtly pull back that curtain and really examine it, and made the statement that we cannot lower our guard, that you can't just say, oh, we're perfect now, and that's that.
The trouble is Earth. On Earth, there is no poverty, no crime, no war. You look out the window of Starfleet headquarters and you see paradise. Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise, but the Maquis do not live in paradise. Out there, in the demilitarized zone, all the problems haven't been solved yet. Out there are no saints, just people. Angry, scared, determined people who are going to do whatever it takes to survive, whether it meets with the Federation approval or not.
And underneath a shiny veneer, there can be some very sinister things, a lot of which done with the best of intentions and with the belief that this was the right thing to do, and can then, before we realize it, get warped and twisted into something unrecognizable. That was one of the important things about Deep Space Nine, and Section 31 was one example of that. Now, I take the time to explain this because this is going to come back into play later on in this review, so I think it's important to have that groundwork. So, with that in mind, what is going on in this movie? Well, the movie sees Michelle Yeoh, Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh, reprising her role from Discovery of the deposed Empress of a parallel universe who went to work for Section 31. Again, that's a whole other mess of Star Trek lore that I'm not going to get into right now. But she went to work for Section 31, but as the movie opens, she has left Section 31 and has started her own casino in space, or nightclub in space, where she is once again recruited back into Section 31 with a ragtag group of bizarre agents in order to stop a threat from her home dimension. So there's your basic plot. Pretty standard, really. So before I get into complaining and getting into some very nerd-tastic explaining, let's talk about what this movie does right. And I think the thing it does the best is its cast. all of the actors are clearly having a good time. They're having fun. And they all give pretty compelling and fun performances. Of course, Michelle Yeoh is good at anything. I have yet to see anything that she is not a magnetic force in, and she is clearly loving playing this character. So that, starting at the top and then trickling down to our other actors, I feel like they are the strongest suit of this little card hand. Sorry, that metaphor got away from me. And you can tell, not just through this, but through the way the story is structured, that this was originally intended to be a series. It's very obvious that this was intended to be a new Star Trek series, and then at some point they decided that they were going to make it into a movie instead and just kind of adjusted the script, because this does seem like a group of characters that they want you to follow for a series of adventures to get to know them and their interactions. So it's good that they have a strong cast of actors who, like I said, are clearly enjoying working with each other and enjoying playing their characters. And I think that's the other thing this film does very well, is it gives us a fresh group of Star Trek characters that we haven't seen before, and variations on themes that we have seen done before. So you've got the leader of the group is a displaced, genetically enhanced human from the 21st century. You've got an alien who uses extreme pheromones to seduce people. You've got a character who is a sentient, microscopic organism that rides around in a robotic Vulcan, which is a fascinating idea and gives some of the best performances of the film. You've got a shapeshifter, but not a changeling. You've got the Starfleet officer who is tasked with kind of keeping everybody under control and on task. And then you've got the guy in the weird mech suit, the power armor, essentially. So it's a fun group of new characters and interesting twists on old standards. So you're not kind of getting the same basic, the human, the Vulcan, the this, the that. It's fresh, and I appreciated that. The only thing that keeps this movie from really tanking out to me is the fact that its characters are interesting and likable and have a great chemistry together. That kept me interested enough to keep watching when there were several times when I was just like, I really want to turn this off. But the characters kept me invested long enough to get to the end. So that's what it does well. So where does it go off the rails? Well, in a number of places. Let me harp on this first. And this the aesthetic of this is ugly. It's ugly as sin. Like the costumes, the set design, everything just looks awful. It doesn't look like Trek. And I don't mind that from the point of view that we're looking at new portions of the galaxy and a new timeline, and so things are going to look different. That's fine. I don't mind things looking different. But this is so far into almost parody. This looks like, the aesthetic of this looks like something out of The Fifth Element and Guardians of the Galaxy. This movie, at 90% of the time, what this movie looks like and what it feels like is a cheap Sci-Fi Channel ripoff of Guardians of the Galaxy. That's what it looks like. And I mentioned this in my opening, that one of the problems with Discovery was a severe identity crisis. One of the problems that it had is that it didn't know, okay, are we the prequel to the J.J. Abrams universe? Are we a prequel to the standard Trek universe? Are we a prequel? Are we a reboot? We have to tie everything back to familiar iconography. And as such, it all just became this hodgepodge and this mess where things didn't make sense and didn't connect to any one thing. And we see that again here. This movie, did the plot, when I was describing it, did it sound familiar? Did it sound a little familiar? It should, because it's the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad. And that is what this movie is. It is the bastard offspring of Guardians of the Galaxy and the original, actually both Suicide Squad movies. The colorful ragtag team of goofballs, you know, the high action element, the cartoony action element. And here's the thing, again, if that's what this movie was, if that is what it was at its core, I wouldn't necessarily mind it. You know, I don't know if I'd call it a Trek movie, but it would at least be entertaining. Kind of like the third of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, Star Trek Beyond. I don't really consider that a Trek movie, because it's not. But it's a decent sci-fi action film. Kind of like Live Free or Die Hard is not a good Die Hard movie, but it's a decent, fun, middle-of-the-road action film. But it's not a Die Hard movie. So some of these films, again, with their identity crisis, that's something they run into is, you know, what is a fun movie, but also not fitting within the world of its franchise. And that brings us back to the major problem I have with this film. The major one. And now hopefully I can tie it back to that long rant about the background of Section 31. So this film is, again, it wants to be Guardians of the Galaxy in that, you know, crazy action sequences and chases and martial arts duels and all of this. That if you're thinking of in terms of a spy movie, it more closely resembles something like James Bond. Even the various characters are all in some way, shape, or form takeoffs of classic spy movie archetypes. You know, most notably the alien with the pheromones. You know, they even describe her as a walking honeypot. You know, if you don't know what that is, look up, you know, spy terminology for a honeypot. Now, again, on the surface, there's nothing inherently wrong with a Trek movie wanting to kind of do their version of a James Bond film. However, here's the problem with that. When it was introduced, Section 31 was introduced as a direct, I'm going to use the wrong English here, but it was as a direct rebuff of the James Bond super spy fantasy. The character for whom Section 31 would most often revolve around was Dr. Bashir. And one of the things that Dr. Bashir loved to do was play James Bond on the holosuite. Well, when Section 31 was introduced, they went to this it's early in the morning as I'm recording this. My words are not coming. This idealistic, somewhat naive young man, and basically said, being a spy is not that. Being a spy, and even Garrick, who was a spy, tells him this, is that this is not what a spy does. A spy's life is not glamorous. A spy's life is dark, it's lonely, and you don't always get to take the moral high ground. You are often down in the dirt doing the very worst things, and you do those bad things because it's going to allow other people to be safe. You are not, and you are forever tarnished. But it allows the general populace to continue on with their lives and live their idealized, wonderful existence. That is what Section 31 did, was it introduced, again, that moral gray area of things are not fun and sometimes bad things have to be done for the greater good. So by turning this movie into a bad takeoff of a James Bond film, you are going in the face of what Section 31 was created to do thematically. I am all for, and I've thought this since Section 31 was introduced, that a series or a movie about a Star Trek version of like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or the Manchurian Candidate or things of that nature would be really interesting and really fun. Star Trek at its core, and this is again where Discovery missed the mark, is the exploration of humanity. It's the questions, it is the self-discovery, it is us living our best lives, but also acknowledging the darker aspects of our past and our makeup in order to come out the other side. If they had done a spy film about characters having to do something morally questionable and having to debate and balance the ramifications of it, do the ends justify the means? Is it okay to do something really bad in order to preserve peace for billions of people? Characters having to make tough choices and what that does to them.
Federation needs men like you, Doctor. Men of conscience, men of principle, men who can sleep at night. You're also the reason Section 31 exists. Someone has to protect men like you from a universe that doesn't share your sense of right and wrong.
That would have been interesting, and that would have been fun, and that would have been Trek. But this ugly, cheap-looking, bad knockoff, and quite frankly, Guardians of the Galaxy is in a class of its own, but quite frankly, ripping off the Suicide Squad movies, sorry, that's like ripping off instead of a art thief trying to copy some wonderful masterpiece, they're copying a paint by numbers. And that's exactly what they did. Doing that, no, you get exactly what this movie is. It's hollow. Any character development or self-realization is just surface level and doesn't get to the meat of the characters, doesn't get to the meat of the conflict. It doesn't raise any big questions. It doesn't debate anything. It plods along from one bad spy movie cliche to the next. Who's the traitor? Who set us up? Looks like the person who was behind it all the whole time is a former lover or friend of one of the characters. Oh, what a shock. And doesn't bring anything new, interesting, thought-provoking, or in any way entertaining to the table. And I am sorry. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm not sorry. Those things are what make Trek Trek. To the outside observer, yes, Trek is space battles and fire the torpedoes and Khan. Yeah, to the outside observer, yes, that is what Trek is. But that is not what Trek is. It's never been what Trek was. Trek has always been deeper than that. It's been the thought-provoking science fiction that counterbalances Star Wars fun roller coaster ride. It's not to say that Star Trek can't be fun. It's not to say that it can't have roller coaster elements or fun action. It's not to say any of that. It's just saying that that's not what it is at its core. And if you don't get that, if you don't understand that, then what you create may not be terrible. It may be watchable and even to a certain extent entertaining, but it's not Trek. And if you don't understand the core element of the franchise that you're making a new installment of, then why the hell are you putting the Star Trek title on it except to cash in on that IP? And that to me is even worse. Just we'll slap this name on it, and they're to kind of get fans of this into it, and yeah. So yeah, disappointing. This whole thing was very, very disappointing on the whole. I think maybe again, like non-Trek fans will maybe enjoy it. Again, those who think that the Snyderverse version of DC was somehow viable and good. I don't know why, but some people do. Fine, fair enough. That's why there's 32 flavors of ice cream out there. But, and so maybe in that respect, maybe it's done its job. Maybe it can bring some new audiences in. So I guess if that's the case, if it's a gateway into the Trek universe for some, maybe it was worth it. But for me, and I think for a lot of long-term Trek fans, this is a very, very disappointing chapter in the Trek canon. So let's wrap this up. Let's do it. The only other thing I can complain about is the guy in the mech suit, but that goes along with the cheap aesthetic. He looks terrible. It's ridiculous looking. It's so bad. So freaking bad. So bad. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just had to get that in. So, final grade for Star Trek Section 31 is gonna be a C-. And the only thing that keeps it from dipping into the D territory is its cast, which, again, do a good job, and were the only thing that kept me from just kind of turning it off and going and doing something else. But aside from that, it was disappointing. So I'd say there are better things to do with your time than watch this movie. So there you have it. That's my take on Star Trek Section 31. Okay, so thank you all. Thank you all for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it was helpful. Hope it was fun. And be back next time. So until then, thank you very much and drive safe, and I'll see you at the movies.